Puppet warp, object snapping, painting directly on 3D models. Hey guys, welcome back. The new version 4.0 of Clip Studio Paint has just come out recently, and the team at Celsius has kindly given me the opportunity to have a try on it a little early to get to know some of the new features and share my thoughts on them. Today we are going to have a little drawing session while I demonstrate some of the features included in version 4.0 that I think are very practical for everyday use. There will be timestamps on each demonstrated feature, so you could refer to that if you are just looking for a quick overview. As a heads up, I'm using the iPad version of CSP, but I will also explain where you can find specific functions in the PC version if it's different from the iPad version. I would like to express my biggest thank you to the team at Clip Studio Paint for the amazing opportunity and for sponsoring this video today. So let's get started. The first feature that immediately caught my eye was that CSP now supports direct painting on 3D primitives and 3D drawing figures. If you're not familiar with it, 3D primitive means basic 3D forms, like cubes, spheres, cylinders, and more, while 3D drawing figures would be these human body models. So first, let's start by summoning a 3D body model by clicking on this material icon on the left side toolbar, and click on 3D. If you're using the PC version of CSP, you can find it by clicking on this little arrow on the upper right hand side of the screen. After the 3D model is on the canvas, you can use just about any brush to paint on it. So let me first try it using a regular G pen right here. And so that's how it goes. If you want to try being a bit adventurous, you can also try using painting brushes. Now, the fun part is, you can also use ornamental brushes for this. If you're going to have some 19th century ornament patterns on the chest of the character, or if you want to have thorns and flowers on the thigh of your character, you can now do that pretty easily. Now that's cool and all, but what if I wanted to make a symmetrical pattern? For that, you can simply grab a symmetrical ruler right here onto the canvas. Make sure that the ruler is set directly in the middle of the model. And now if you draw on one side, it's going to register on the other side too. However, keep in mind that the way symmetrical rulers work here is it's not attached or ingrained inside the model itself. So every time you rotate the model, the symmetry ruler is not going to follow the model, but instead it's going to register on the part of the model that's shown on the screen. To use the symmetry ruler on a 3D model, you'll need to align the model's position and rotation to the center of the screen. You can do this by clicking on the camera icon on the floating toolbar under the model, and then picking the angle that will make your model completely centered and facing front. If you want the symmetry to be on the back side of the model, you can also pick the angle where the model is facing back. Personally, I like handpicking and setting up multiple 3D objects from the asset store together to build a base scene of my illust, including the lighting. And if you're lazy like me, you probably have thought to yourself, how nice would it be if we could have a preview on how shadows on certain object would fall on another object. And that was finally answered in the 3.1 update. Important thing to note is that the version 4.0 includes all the updates and features before it. So if you have a CSP subscription, you may already have been using this, but now it's available to PC or Mac users as a one-time purchase. To make this work, first you would want to make sure the 3D object is selected using this tool. And you'll see this floating toolbar around the bottom side of the model. Then click on this wrench icon, and on the left hand side of the pop-up tab, click on the one that says Light Source. There's a checkbox that says Cast Shadows. You want to make sure that is checked, and on the drop-down above it, choose the one where it says Cast on Ground and Models. Personally, I really enjoy this feature because I like incorporating 3D scenes into my illust as a rough base, and this lets me simulate cast shadow directly in CSP without needing to open a separate software. So I can definitely see myself using this often. This also works on if, let's say, a character has their hand raised up covering their faces, you can now see shadow cast from their hand onto their face. Another new feature that I was super looking forward to is Puppet Warp. If you're not familiar with Puppet Warp, basically you can assign pins or joints onto specific points of an image, and then you can drag those pins to move or twist that around. Since I'm using a quickly pose 3D model as a base, the pose is still a bit too stiff for my liking, and in this case we can use the Puppet Warp to bend the joints a little more. Right now we have our base as a 3D layer. To be able to use the Puppet Warp on our 3D base, we would want to make sure that the 3D base has been converted into a raster layer. To do this, go to the toolbar on the top of the screen and click on Layer, Rasterize. Keep in mind that you won't be able to rotate or change the pose of the base once it's rasterized, so you would want to make sure that the pose and angle looks okay before rasterizing. Now to access the Puppet Warp, go to the toolbar on the top of the screen again and click on Edit, Transform, Puppet Warp. For this to work, you would want to use a colored drawing or at least a sketch with the silhouette filled in. You'll see that your drawing will be covered in mesh, and to place the pins, simply click on any point you want to rotate or move around, which is usually the joints part if it's a character drawing, and a red dot will appear. Then you also want to make sure that you're also pinning down the areas that you don't want to move. Then you can freely move the red dots. I would say the warping results look pretty smooth. I also wanted to make a brief mention that version 4.0 now allows snapping. This is basically a feature that helps you align objects quickly and precisely with other objects, grids, or layers. Currently, this is only available for text, rulers, image materials, and vector layers, but this is an update in a good direction, and as a personal suggestion, I would definitely love to see this being integrated into raster layers in the future. Although in the meantime, CSP does have a function to convert a raster layer into image material layer, which will then enable you to use snapping on the desired layer. To do this, go to the toolbar on the top and click on Layer, Convert Layer, Image Material Layer. And when you're finished with the snapping, you can convert it back into a raster layer. As I said earlier, version 4.0 includes all the updates that came before it. This includes the updated UI for their filters and effects from 3.1, where you can preview and compare how each filter looks like on your drawing before applying it. Previously, we would have to apply the filters one by one to preview the effect, and there wasn't really an option to compare one another, which is kind of a hassle and takes a long time. There are two types of filters here, which is the quick filters and quick effects. Quick filters are more like the color filters for your drawing. For example, Louis color filter, sepia filter, and monochrome filter. Whereas quick effects is more like editing effects, such as lens blur, chromatic aberration, and extract lines. I'm going to sound very uncultured and unartistic right now, but I just realized how very different lens blur and Gaussian blur is. I would say the artistic lines filter is pretty nice and I can already see myself using this a bunch. I'll let you in on one simple trick to make your backgrounds look more clear and sharp. Because I tend to paint my backgrounds using soft or blendy brushes, at times parts of it may look overly blended and muddy. What I do when that happens is make a copy of my background layers, then merge the copy, and go to Filters, Sharpen. After that, to add more clarity, we can use the Artistic Lines Only filter. Adjust the line so that it's clear, but also not too much. Then, convert the layer mode of the lines layer here, and lock the transparency. Pick a gray color, and then press Ctrl F to change the colors of the lines to gray. Personally, I like to use linear light or linear burn layer mode for this, but you could experiment with other modes and find out what works best for your artwork. And there we have it. This may not look like much of a change from afar, but if we zoom in and compare, you are going to find that the second one definitely looks more sharp and defined. Now after watching me use the features to work on this drawing, how are we liking CSP version 4.0 so far? Apart from what I showed in this video, there are actually many more new improvements and features such as the updates on the more advanced parts of 3D model editing, animation, and video editing. As someone who mainly uses CSP for character illustrations, the features and improvements are such an increase in quality of life and efficiency in my work process. My favorite out of all the features I use in this video are the cast shadow and puppet warp, and personally, I really think they're worth the upgrade, and I'll be using them a lot. Let me know what your favorite feature is, and if you're interested in getting version 4.0, there are 3 options you can look into. There's a subscription plan for CSP, which has both a monthly and annual options, that will automatically grant you access to all the new updates while your plan is active. This option is available for Windows, Mac, iPad, iPhone, and Android. Since I mainly work on the iPad version of CSP, this is what I'm personally having. Or there's a similar alternative called Update Pass that will grant you all the updates for 1 year. This is an add-on available for perpetual licenses, which are only supported on Windows or Mac OS PC devices. If you already have a perpetual version license on your PC, you may ask, what will happen to your CSP if your updates pass runs out? In that case, you can of course still use CSP, it will just refer to your last perpetual license once you cancel the update pass. Alternatively, you can also get the perpetual version of CSP version 4.0, meaning you buy the permanent license for CSP 4.0. However, you will not be able to get updates for CSP 4.1 and above. Lastly, I would like to say thank you again to Clip Studio Paint for sponsoring this video, and for letting me do a review of CSP version 4.0. It was really fun to experiment with the new features while sharing my thoughts with all of you. If you're interested to see more of my CSP tips and tricks, you can check out my previous videos where I share my drawing processes using Clip Studio Paint. If there's any content you want to see from me next, as always, feel free to suggest them in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching and see you next time.